All right, Nuggets, welcome back to the second in our PSA series about mental health and just being well and taking care of yourselves. This one, we are going to dig a little bit deeper into depression, which is one of the most common mental health issues that that kids here and kids really all over the place are dealing with. So back with me today, special guest Jessica Hotchkiss, who interned here in Holly, so she knows Holly kids. She is also currently a mental health counselor at Prairie Land Counseling in Fargo, and she's a child life specialist at Essentia. So lots of expertise in working on stuff. So thanks again for joining us, Jess.
Yes. Oh, thank you guys. And it's so fun to, when you started off and you're like, hello Nuggets. And it just brings me back, brings me right back. So fun. So excited to be with you guys talking about this really riveting topic of depression.
Yeah, but hard too.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just start with what is depression? Like what is the kind of more clinical definition of it?
Yeah. Well, the most basic way to kind of explain it is it's, as you already mentioned, very common for people to experience, but it's more than just sadness. I think depression kind of gets that rap of you're just really sad, you're depressed. And what we know is that depression actually is very noticeable when it interferes with your daily activities. Like we've talked about in our first video, having trouble getting out of bed, sleeping, losing interest in things that used to bring you joy, noticing for yourself that you have changes in schoolwork or you don't care about the things that you used to care about, relationships, or have energy to take care of yourself. And those are kind of like the least clinical way to put it, but really when you notice that something's different, that you have really low energy, or you can't bring yourself to have that happiness or that joy that you once had, those are the things that we notice with depression the most.
So let's talk about what depression looks like, because I think with so many mental health issues, they look different for everybody. And because we all have our own personalities and we all have our own ways of kind of how we learned how to deal with things. So let's talk about some examples of what depression looks like a lot of times for high school kids.
Yeah. And when you're meeting with someone and we're looking at, is depression kind of in line with what's going on with you? We're going to ask a lot of questions that maybe you can ask yourself right now and see, is this kind of fitting with what I'm experiencing? So one of those questions, the main one is, have you lost interest in things that used to be pleasurable to you? Whether it's, again, being around people, whether it's playing basketball, whether it's doing schoolwork, something that wouldn't be kind of congruent with who you are. And a good example we said in the last video is, especially if your friends start to notice, you just don't seem like yourself. Sometimes a telltale sign is, we call them activities of daily living, but really, hygiene, showering, eating, sleeping, those things that are daily activities for you. If you've had trouble doing those things where it feels like a chore to kind of do those activities of daily living, that's a big sign too. Feelings of helplessness or worthlessness are really big indicators. Are your grades dropping? And is that kind of out of the norm for you compared to what they were? Are you feeling tired or losing energy more than normal? Do you feel like, the people around you, it feels kind of isolating and there's not a lot of energy that you get from people anymore? Are you kind of irritable and have trouble kind of keeping that motivation up? Those are all things to be considering when we're talking about depression. But again, we're not going to self-diagnose ourselves, right? We really want to make sure we have those people in our lives that can help us discover if that's what's going on for us, because there is a difference between depression and what we would consider an adjustment disorder, meaning that, we've had this big event, much like COVID, and we're still trying to figure out how to adjust to this. So it's really important to recognize, again, is it different than normal? And am I having trouble getting myself out of this funk compared to in the past where I've maybe just had a hard time going outside because winter's really hard in North Dakota and Minnesota? Is this different than what I'm usually experiencing is kind of a big question.
Yeah. And I think, like I said in the last one, seeing a lot of kids this time of year, this is just a hard time of year. We aren't seeing the sun. It's, we're just coming off of this really cold stretch. We were stuck inside. So I'm seeing that a lot of kids that maybe have struggled a little bit with feeling okay it's kind of exacerbated right now with the weather. That's a really common thing that we see in the school setting this time of year. And I would guess that you're seeing in your office too.
Yeah. And it's very hard to feel, like you're able to go get that physical activity, which physical activity is so good for our bodies and our minds. It kind of clears us of a lot of things that are going on. And when it's negative 45 degrees outside, that's never a thing that I enjoy doing, is getting outside. And so it's really hard when we had even that long stretch just a little bit ago to feel like you have kind of the energy when we're sitting inside a lot and watching Netflix, perhaps. So we have to be aware of the things that are going to keep us kind of engaged, energized, and motivated, even when it's not that cold out. We call those activities of self-care. And it's not just when you've had a bad day and you're going to go get some Dairy Queen, down the road. It really is kind of consistent care that you're taking of yourself, knowing what you need to make sure you're okay.
Right. And that self-care along the way, like those little day-to-day things that we do, are really effective in helping us stay well. So if a student out there is feeling like, gosh, I like a lot of the things that you said, Jess, that sounds a lot like me, and I haven't been feeling like myself, and I don't like how I'm feeling, like I'm ready to just feel happier again. What are some of the most effective ways for students to manage or treat or get help for potential depression?
Yeah. Well, as we mentioned, if you're feeling those things like sad, or really a big one too is that empty feeling, like you feel empty, is kind of a big one that I would say, let's get some assistance. Let's go to someone we trust. And it never hurts to bring someone in on the process, to let someone know how you're feeling, because the biggest thing is depression can kind of feel like this weight, like you're walking around kind of with this cloud over you. And sometimes it's hard to get ourselves out of that. And the expectation that we have to find ways to be okay ourselves is really diminishing the power of connection that we have with other people. So knowing who your resources are, knowing who your people are going to be important. So those people can help figure out what the next step would be. Friends are a great resource, but we also want to make sure that we have those trusted adults that have kind of the experience and the expertise in this area that can say, yeah, this is kind of in line with that. And let's make sure that we have someone set up for you. The biggest misconception that is, I hear a lot about counseling is that maybe they didn't have a good experience with their counselor. It wasn't the right fit. And my biggest thing with that is you're going to find a good counselor when that counselor says to you, if for whatever reason I'm not the right person or the right fit for you, I'm going to give you the names of a few other people. And I've had people, in my life too, who have I went to one or two counselors before I found the right one. And they, don't even identify with having, maybe a chronic mental health condition, but they just really want support every now and again. So finding the right person is important. Knowing who your trusted adults are is important, and knowing how to take care of yourself kind of in that everyday sense. Those self-care activities is going to be the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the role that medication can play in treating depression? Because it's one, I want you guys to know that you have a lot of options and to take care of yourself. And I want you to feel empowered to know that you've got choices. It's not like, oh, you have depression, they're going to put you on meds. But for a lot of people, that is really, really effective to help them kind of get up to the point where they can roll with things again. So can you talk a little bit about what that option looks like?
Yeah. And, I'm not someone who prescribes meds, so I don't have all the answers, but this is a good kind of segue to say you've got people who have specialty areas in all different realms. So they're going to connect you with the people that can get you that additional support. But we do say the best thing is to explore both that therapeutic option, and we're going to also see, is there a need for a med here? Sometimes that is the case, and sometimes it's not. And if that's something that worries you, or you're like, I don't want to be on a medication, starting with just that basic support is going to help you just figure out what's the next step, and can we do it without medication, or is that something that we do need to explore? And based on all of that, you're going to find a medication that works for you, that fits, and that you have a say in. And you're going to tell that provider, whoever it is that's prescribing that medication, what's going on, and they're going to find the best fit. And a lot of times that's looking at mood and what's happening to kind of get that energy back for you.
Mm-hmm. And the medication part works in a nutshell that, you've got different kind of chemicals in your brain that do different things. And sometimes they just get out of balance or out of whack, for a number of reasons. And so the medications kind of help balance that out, which then impacts how your brain works, how your body works, and how you feel. That's like a really simplistic way of explaining it,
Yes.
but that's how it works. Why, I didn't prep you on this one, but why is it important for kids to, like, if they are worried that maybe they're dealing with depression, or if they have a friend who they think is dealing with depression, why is it so important to address that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is when we're in those places, especially when we're in a place of, deep depression where it's hard for us to get out of it, but you might have people in your life noticing what's going on. It's really important to take note of that because we might not be aware of what it is ourselves yet. And that's why, that support, whether it's someone in your school, whether it's a therapy provider or your physician, is going to be able to figure out what's going on, because depression is one of those tricky ones where it can kind of play with your emotions, and it's hard for you to see from the outside what's going on with you. And so even when we talked about earlier, hey, if you're having trouble taking a shower, finding time for your meals, getting out of bed, doing those things, you find yourself being late or really struggling with some of those basic activities that you would normally do, that's an indicator that, okay, what's going on here? Maybe I just need to talk this out with someone. But if we don't address it, it can get worse. And we want to make sure that we nip it in the bud as soon as we can. So noticing what's happening with your mental health, I think, is a lifelong activity. I think it's important to know what your baseline is and when that's different, because we don't want it to get worse.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point about lifelong stuff, because I think a lot of you are probably feeling like, I'm doing okay right now, but there is quite likely going to be a time later on in your life when you're not. And so for you to just be aware of how you are and taking care of yourself is a really important thing. My hope for all of you is that, like, if you ever find yourself with that little like voice on your shoulder, like the cartoon character that's saying like, you're not worth it, nobody cares about you, you're a terrible person, like, that's a huge sign that you're not doing okay, because none of that stuff is true. That's just a sign that you are not doing okay.
Yes,
So,
because you're
any
always
last thoughts?
worthy of that. Oh, I was just going to say, you're always worthy of that. So if you do have those feelings like nobody cares about me, I'm not worth this, or nobody's going to care if I come seek help, that's just not true. Everybody in the world cares about people in whatever circle that they're in. You just need to find the right person to say, here's what's going on for me, and I trust you. I'm trusting you to tell you what's happening, and I trust that you're going to give me the help that I need. So there are those people. Just remind yourself that you're worthy enough of that help and support.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Jessica, again for being our guest, to help us kind of talk about depression and what it is and what we do with that. Next time we'll be back with the third installment in this little mini series where we're going to talk about anxiety, which is probably the number one mental health issue that we are seeing kids have on their plates. So take care of yourself, Nuggets, and tune into the next one. Thanks, Jessica.
Bye, guys.